as he challenged it to see how well it could handle fire. The giant serpent lunged with a furious roar, its huge mouth open to eat its prey. With amazing agility, Fang Yi dodged the attack, flipping through the air while swinging his glowing golden sword. As he landed, he coolly told the monster to look at his blade, a clear challenge to the giant beast. The serpent seemed to pull back, cautious of the glowing weapon. Seeing his chance, Fang Yi counterattacked. Leaping through the air, he delivered a powerful slash to the serpent's face, his sword covered in the crackling blue energy of his thunder power. The force of the blow was huge, but the result wasn't what he expected. Instead of crushing its skull, the creature's head split down the middle, revealing a second identical head underneath as if it were shedding its skin. Fang Yi landed on his feet, his eyes wide with surprise at this strange development. The creature's split head then pulled apart completely, shedding its outer layer to reveal its true, healed form. As green energy pulsed in its neck, Fang Yi knew the fight was far from over. The serpent reacted with shock and pain as the leftover thunder energy from Fang Yi's sword ran through its body. It roared in fury as the electrical energy grew stronger, overwhelming its dark power. Watching the creature twist in pain, Fang Yi gave a small, confident smirk. He knew he had the advantage, as he had already sensed this serpent's dark aura was stronger than Candle Knight's. He then revealed his clever plan. When he attacked with his sword, he had held back the full force of his fire. Instead, he had used the blade to carry and channel the thunder power from his hand directly into the snake's body. He compared the two creatures, realizing this serpent was a far more dangerous and evolved monster than Candle Knight. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain in his shoulder where the rat creature had bitten him. He hissed, looking down to see strange purple snake scales growing from the wound. He understood immediately. Just as he'd thought, this was a smart, mutated species. Its poison, delivered by its partner's bite, had a paralyzing effect that let it kill silently. He could feel a sharp pain from the wound, but he also felt his Golden Sun breathing technique working to fight the venom. With a determined look, he knew he had the perfect counter. The Yang Flame power could dissolve the poison, the Golden Sun technique would protect and heal his body, and the Thunder power would purify anything left. As the energy from his powers pulsed through him, Fang Yi recognized the benefit of his combined abilities. The mix of his Yang Flame and Thunder powers now gave him a clear pain signal to any poison, acting as an early warning system. He knew he was lucky. For others, the serpent's sneaky poison would have been impossible to cure. He guessed that for the serpent to have grown so large, it must have relied on surprise attacks. He thought of the monster's den, filled with the skulls of its victims. With Candle Knight acting as the perfect bait, the two creatures had become a deadly trap even for top pioneers, which explained why so many had disappeared. But in the end, it didn't matter. As he watched the creature's huge skeleton burn to ash in his holy fire, he knew its reign of terror was over. Standing before the fire, Fang Yi felt satisfied. His inner flame was powerful, but the triple critical hit from his new thunder power had sealed his victory. He felt confident that his fighting skills were now pretty good, even compared to other high-level pioneers. He stood silently for a moment, watching the flames burn the last of the monster. Just as he was about to leave, he paused, reaching out his hand as if he sensed something. His eyes narrowed. He wasn't alone. Someone was still there. He turned just in time to see a figure stumbling out from the smoke, coughing from the ash. It was Su Qingying. She stood silently, covered in soot and clearly tired, but she was alive. As the smoke cleared, Fang Yi found himself looking at the unconscious members of the other squad, with Su Qingying sitting among them. He recognized her as the agent from the association and coolly told her that there was no need to pretend. He added that her playing dead act needed work, which surprised her. Embarrassed, Su Qingying covered her face. Realizing this was the same powerful pioneer she had been tracking, she tried to make an excuse, claiming she woke up from the smell. Fang Yi, however, wasn't fooled. He complimented her, pointing out that while her teammates were out of energy, she was strong enough to keep a small reserve to protect herself. If she had really been unconscious, he explained, she wouldn't have been able to smell anything. Flustered, Su Qingying could only offer an awkward thank you. In her mind, she was amazed. He had seen right through her. She had indeed kept a bit of spiritual energy for protection. She had no idea how he had beaten both Candle Knight and the giant serpent all by himself. Noticing her embarrassment, Fang Yi's tone softened. He told her she didn't need to cover her eyes and that he only asked her to be honest with him and keep his identity secret. Seeing she and her team were safe, he said it was getting late and he would be leaving. Su Qingying tried to call out to him, but it was too late. Saying that explaining things would spoil the surprise, he jumped effortlessly through the hole he had made in the factory ceiling and disappeared into the night. As he traveled across the rooftops, Fang Yi thought about the battle. He was glad Su Qingying hadn't tried to absorb the dark power from the monsters, remembering its disgusting coldness. He wondered why he couldn't absorb it himself. He guessed maybe the dark energy was already gone, or his body had instinctively rejected it. He decided to think about it later, at home. Left alone in the huge, abandoned factory, Su Qingying looked up at the moonlit hole in the ceiling where Fang Yi had disappeared. She sighed, disappointed that she hadn't gotten a good look at his face, and realizing he still didn't trust her, or the association. Her quiet moment was short. Acting like a squad leader again, she walked over to the unconscious captain of the destroyer squad and gave him a few slaps, telling him to wake up. The man groaned and slowly opened his eyes, bruised and confused. His first thought was panic, and he shot up, shouting that they had been ambushed. Su Qingying just watched him with a calm look. The leader and his squad members then saw why she was so calm: the massive, smoking skeleton of the giant serpent. They stared in total disbelief, confused by the scene. The leader demanded to know what happened and where the powerful yang energy came from. Su Qingying calmly explained that a powerful pioneer had rescued them. She continued her carefully planned report, explaining that the pioneer was likely the person from her original mission, a very high-level individual with a yang attribute. She let her voice trail off, suggesting his appearance was a lucky coincidence. The other squad members were in complete awe, with one saying it was unbelievable that one person could defeat both monsters. Su Qingying added that she hadn't managed to recruit him yet, and that he had even managed to track her back, which only made him more mysterious. Getting back to their grim job, the destroyer squad leader asked where Candle Knight's body was. As he began using a green energy technique to clean the scene, he said they needed to collect the remains for the association. As the squads began the cleanup, the destroyer squad's leader used a green orb of energy to gather the strange, dark remains left from the battle. As he stepped forward, he accidentally crushed a piece of debris on the floor, which suddenly exploded in a blast of bright blue electrical energy. He jumped back in pain, yelling at the force of the shock as Su Qingying looked on in surprise. This new discovery only made things more mysterious. The remains, which they now realized belonged to Candle Knight, were crackling with leftover electricity. The squad leader turned to Su Qingying, questioning her report. He reminded her she had said the pioneer had a yang attribute, yet this incredibly strong electrical power told a different story. The two leaders knelt to look at the electrically charged body. Su Qingying was stunned by the pure strength of the thunder power left behind, confirming it was a high-tier power. This led the destroyer squad's leader to a new idea. Maybe two high-level pioneers had appeared, one to kill the serpent and another to kill Candle Knight, before leaving together. Su Qingying knew that wasn't right. She struggled with how to explain the unbelievable truth, remembering the image of the lone pioneer holding both crackling blue lightning and roaring golden fire. She knew no one would believe that a single person could have two different top-level powers. Made you a genius. Having two was almost unheard of. The impossible proof was right in front of them. The burning skeleton of the giant serpent was the work of a Yang Flame Walker, while the electrified body of Candle Knight was the clear mark of a Thunder Tyrant. The combined squads could only look on in complete disbelief, wondering what kind of monster this mysterious pioneer really was. As reinforcements from the association arrived, Su Qingying was glad she had left team members outside. If she had been inside too long without checking in, they would have reported her missing. She grimly realized the rescue team now at the scene had originally been sent to collect their bodies. Her two subordinates, who were knocked out by the serpent's poison, finally woke up. They scrambled to her side, crying with relief that their captain was still alive. With the threat gone, the association's team began their work. Their job had changed from a rescue to a forensic investigation. Using advanced scanning tech, they carefully analyzed the leftover spiritual energy and the battle signs, trying to piece together what happened for their report back to headquarters. Soon, one of the specialists approached Su Qingying and the destroyer squad's leader with his findings. He reported that after comparing all the data, from fighting habits to the way both monsters were killed, there was a 99% probability that one person was responsible for killing both of them. The two squad leaders stared at each other, their faces showing both shock and serious concern. The other squad members murmured to each other in disbelief. They were processing the fact that they had been saved by a pioneer with two different high-tier powers, something they never thought was possible. They knew either monster could have easily killed them all, yet this powerhouse had finished them both off, seeming to use single strikes. The power difference between them and this mysterious person was just ridiculous. Understanding the huge importance of this discovery, Su Qingying contacted her superior. She reported that the information on her target had been significantly updated. Looking up at the hole in the ceiling, she confirmed that the mysterious pioneer from the university and the powerful individual codenamed Tyrant were, in fact, the same person. Back in his office, the association superior listened calmly to her report. After thinking about the information, he gave a new command, telling Xiao Su to pause her mission for now. He explained that the pioneer had saved her team, killed the monsters, and secured the area. These were not the actions of an enemy. He added that he and Old Han, Major Han Li, didn't agree on the matter, and for her own safety and to avoid leaving a bad impression on their powerful potential ally, she was to stop all contact with the tyrant for the time being. While on the phone with her boss Su Qingying, though she had agreed to pause her mission, couldn't help but add one more piece of information. She told him she had one more theory, based on what happened when she had tracked Tyrant to the back mountain where he was advancing his power. Her boss, interested, asked her to explain. She explained that during that encounter she had sensed an incredibly strong aura where he was active. At the time, she suspected he might have a spiritual weapon but thought it was unlikely. However, now that it was confirmed he had 2 high-tier powers, the possibility seemed much more real. The association superior was surprised by this new information, questioning if the pioneer really had a spiritual weapon. He quickly became skeptical, leaning back and saying it was highly unlikely. He argued that no matter how talented, a solo pioneer couldn't possibly have such a rare item without outside help. Furthermore, he added, the team had found no traces of a third spiritual energy, which would usually come from a separately made spiritual weapon. Su Qingying quickly corrected him, clarifying an important detail. The spiritual weapon aura she had sensed during her first encounter with him was clearly a yang at tribute. This new information completely changed things. The superior's eyes widened as he understood what this meant. If the weapons at tribute came directly from the user's own yang energy, it meant he wasn't just using a weapon, he was creating it. This led to an amazing conclusion. If he could create his own spiritual weapons, then he had to be a spirit creation realm cultivator. Such a being could theoretically do this alone, but that level of power was almost mythical. Su Qingying was floored by this idea, knowing that cultivators at that level were extremely rare, with barely more than 2 in the entire world. The superior then thought of an even more terrifying possibility. If this person did have a third, separate attribute, it would shift the balance of power and shake the entire pioneer community. He explained that according to all known research, different attributes clash inside the human body, making it nearly impossible for them to exist together. So far, no pioneer had ever been confirmed to have 3 different spiritual attributes. Therefore, if the pioneer truly had a spiritual weapon, the fact that they didn't detect a third energy signature from it might actually be a good thing. As the call ended, the superior was left with a single worrying thought. He could only hope that such a powerful pioneer would never become an enemy of humanity. Back at his apartment, Fang Yi stood thoughtfully under a hot shower, washing away the dirt and tiredness from his recent battle. As he dried off, he thought about the current state of the world. He knew there was less than a year until the official spiritual energy revival, but dangerous monsters and strange events were already happening more and more often. He used his yang attribute to easily dry his clothes, his hand glowing with golden energy as he thought about how many pioneers, like himself, had already started cultivating on their own. He thought back to the aggressive men he had met at the lava river, realizing that once the connection between the body and the spiritual world was opened, people naturally became more sensitive to the world's changes. He recognized that even without the country's official approval, many self-trained pioneers had already reached the 1-star Ghost Axe realm. The fact that the government, through agents like Su Qingying, was now reaching out to wild pioneers like him showed that both sides were in a relatively peaceful phase of mutual exploration. Standing in his room, thinking about Major Han Li and Su Qingying, he concluded that for now, the monsters were still under control, and there was no serious conflict yet among the different pioneer groups. However, as he finished getting dressed, he knew this peace was fragile. The government had already created the Spiritual Energy Cultivation Association, but it still hadn't told the public about it. He understood their strategy perfectly. While people were talking more about local problems and strange events, the government was walking a fine line, trying to both protect humanity and give subtle early warnings without causing mass panic. Despite his recent victories, Fang Yi's analysis of the world situation was still grim. He knew the problem was the government's lack of confidence to officially start a full-scale cultivation era. With such a huge population, he understood that once the full truth was revealed, society would likely collapse into chaos and death. In the current state, even official pioneers couldn't stop the inevitable chaos, and the mix of internal problems and external threats from monsters would only make things worse. He admitted that the government's gentle, careful approach wasn't wrong, knowing that human fear and panic could be more destructive than any monster. However, what truly worried him was how fast the monsters were developing, which was far exceeding his expectations. He reviewed the information on the creatures he had just fought. They were a typical product of dark attribute contamination, specifically the shadow attribute, a sub-branch of dark energy that his system identified as a natural enemy to pioneers, and currently something he couldn't absorb. He realized these monsters were far smarter than typical beasts, working together to trap and kill pioneers, whom they saw as a good food source. He knew, however, that these creatures were still much weaker than the true dark-type monsters he remembered from his previous life. Monsters that could destroy entire countries on their own. Still, the close call was a serious reminder of the growing danger. He was certain that if he hadn't been there, Su Qingying and her entire squad would have been wiped out. A bit of hope sparked inside him as he thought about the system's wording. The fact that the dark attribute was only temporarily unabsorbable suggested that once certain conditions were met, he might be able to use its power himself, a possibility that could be key to winning in the future. He reviewed his current abilities. He now possessed the golden sun breathing technique of the yang attribute, the divine thunder tempering of the thunder attribute, and the crimson flame blade technique. With these perfectly suited, high-tier techniques and his current strength as a 3-star Ghost Axe Realm pioneer, he knew very few could match him. Yet, as he stood surrounded by his own great power, he knew with absolute certainty that it was still not enough. His thoughts were suddenly interrupted by his phone ringing. He picked it up, surprised to see a call from his auntie. On the other end of the line, his aunt asked about his health before explaining the real reason for her call. She told him that his cousin was coming to study in the city and, worried for her safety, asked if she could stay at his place for a few days instead of a hotel. Feng Yi was taken aback, his memory of his cousin extremely fuzzy. All he could recall was a quiet, straight-A student who was obsessed with her studies. He couldn't even remember what she looked like. Despite this, he agreed, telling his aunt that there was a spare room. When he asked when she would be arriving, his aunt simply replied that she would give the cousin his address and let her come over by herself. Elsewhere, in a dark room lit only by a computer monitor, a person with long, almost claw-like fingers typed quickly on a keyboard. The person, wearing a big hoodie with bare ears, was finishing a phone call with her mother. Her mother, who was Fang Yi's aunt, told her that she should arrive at her cousin's place by tomorrow afternoon and that she would bring some specialty snacks. The person politely ended the call, saying it was no trouble and that she had something else to do. On her screen was a chat window for a group called Spiritual Energy Revival, Martial Arts Vanguard Team. The user, Feng Heiju, had just announced her arrival in the city and her plans to stay at her cousin's place. After ending the call, she clicked her mouse, pulling up a new window. It was a rumor alert about an internet-famous town, now nicknamed Death Town, where 3 more people had vanished in relation to a pork beast challenge. A gruesome, blood-splattered image of the town was with the article. With glowing glasses reflecting the screen, Feng Heiju identified the location as Yanghuo Town, her interest clearly sparked. Her browsing was interrupted when her mother entered the room, asking if she had finished packing. Feng Heiju told her mother that she was packed, but that she'd rather stay in a hotel than bother her cousin. Her mother insisted, saying it was much safer than staying alone and that she trusted the cousin completely. Gently pushing her daughter out the door, her mother gave her some final advice. Be sure not to cause trouble and help out around the house when she could. Feng Heiju reassured her mother that she understood. Once the door was closed, Feng Heiju let out a small sigh, preparing herself for the visit. She thought of it as just one more hurdle to overcome. Adjusting her glasses with a flash of determination, she resolved that no matter what her cousin was like, he couldn't possibly be more difficult to handle than a monster. The next day, under a bright blue sky, a young woman with long dark hair and glasses pulled a suitcase toward an apartment building. She checked her phone, confirming that the map had led her to the correct destination. Looking up at the building, she murmured to herself that this must be the place, ready to finally meet the cousin she barely remembered. As Lin Yi stood outside the apartment building, Fang Yi came out, carrying a bag. She called out, asking if he was her cousin. He stopped, surprised, and asked if she was Lin Yi to confirm, though he admitted to himself that he didn't recognize her at all. An awkward silence hung between them for a moment. Later, inside the apartment, they sat on the couch, making polite conversation. Fang Yi asked if she was in the city for a summer camp, which she confirmed. He told her to let him know if she needed anything, and she thanked him. After their brief chat, he gave her the key to her room, which was across from his, before going to his own room. As she watched him leave, she felt relieved, thinking her cousin seemed easy to get along with and wouldn't get in her business. However, Fang Yi was not clueless. From the moment she sat down, he had sensed a faint but strange spiritual aura from her. He wondered if his senses were off, or if she just wasn't good enough to hide her power. He immediately suspected that she was also a pioneer. The aura he felt was faint but clear, and he realized her story about a summer camp was probably a cover for her real reason for being in the city. Meanwhile, in her room, Lin Yi was on her phone, confirming Fang Yi's suspicions. She messaged her pioneer group, the martial arts vanguard team, saying her cousin seemed nice and wouldn't interfere. The chat turned to recent events, with members talking about the powerful pioneer at the lava river. Lin Yi warned her team to be careful, as many powerful people were still hiding. After agreeing to wait for her signal, she logged off. She decided it was best not to do any cultivation for now, worried her cousin might discover her secret. 3 days passed. Fang Yi soon found that living with his cousin was making his cultivation difficult. His meditations could be interrupted at any time, like when she came out of the bathroom wrapped only in a towel. He also worried that the bright golden aura from his breathing technique was too obvious and would be impossible to hide. But the hardest part was her overwhelming kindness. One evening, she proudly gave him a delicious-looking dinner she had made. He tried to insist on doing the dishes, but she refused, saying it was the least she could do. He found her perfect politeness and extreme cleanliness almost strange. Despite the trouble, Fang Yi decided to go along with it. He thought that by letting her be overly helpful, he might get her to let her guard down. He knew this was the only way he could find out what she was really up to. Their quiet dinner was interrupted when her phone on the table began to vibrate. Both cousins glanced at the message, their expressions surprised for a moment. Fang Yi used the chance to excuse himself, saying he would go back to his room while she chatted. His cousin could only quietly reply as he left. Left alone, she stared thoughtfully after him for a moment before turning to her phone. Sitting on her bed, she took the call, her expression turning serious. She repeated the information she was getting, confirming that the great change of heaven and earth would happen again the next day at 3 in the afternoon, and she promised she would be there. Fang Yi easily overheard his cousin's phone conversation. She agreed to meet at the entrance of Yanghuo Town. He recognized the name as an internet-famous town in the suburbs, about an hour's drive away. With his suspicions confirmed, he watched her through the wall, his own spiritual energy flaring. He was now certain his cousin was also a pioneer. He was confident, however, that with her current strength, she wouldn't be able to sense him spying. He was impressed by her power. She was still just a middle school student, but she had already reached the 2-star Ghost Axe realm and was close to another breakthrough. He wondered if her high natural talent was the reason for her somewhat strange personality. He now understood her real purpose in the city. The summer camp was just an excuse. She had learned about the coming great change of heaven and earth, and had come to be at the center of it. He knew that every one of these great changes was a chance to get a new technique to increase his own strength. He wondered what kind of power would appear this time. In the end, it didn't matter. With a determined look, he decided that whatever power appeared, he would take it for himself. In her room, his cousin suddenly paused, feeling a strange sensation. She looked around, wondering if it was just her imagination, or if someone had been watching her. Seeing nothing but the moonlit mountains outside, she dismissed the feeling and continued her preparations. The next day, the town of Yanghuo was buzzing with activity, with its mountains in the background. At the town's entrance, Lin Yi met a friend from her pioneer group. The friend playfully teased Yi about her cousin, asking if he was handsome. Yi replied that he was a good person, but just an ordinary-looking guy. Her friend sighed in disappointment. Just then, another woman from their group arrived, a redhead in a purple dress. She reminded the first friend that Yi herself had always said she was just an ordinary person. With the rest of their team there, the redhead announced it was time to get to business. One of the male members asked if a certain she was not coming. The redhead confirmed it would just be the 6 of them, adding that the missing member was always mysterious. Unknown to them, Fang Yi was watching from a nearby cafe balcony, his sword beside him. He noted that his cousin's little squad seemed to be pretty low-key. From where he was, he could sense their strength. The weakest was at the 2-star ghost axe level, and the man who had spoken was even a 3-star. He also overheard them say their team was usually stronger, with one powerful member often absent. As he sat watching, his attention was drawn to the mountains overlooking the town. His eyes narrowed with anticipation, sensing this was where the real event was about to happen. High in the mountains, the great change of heaven and earth finally happened. A giant green vine came down from the clouds, looking like the beanstalk from the fairy tale. This strange event would appear randomly and wasn't destructive, but for pioneers, it was an important key to understanding the changes in their world. Deep in the misty mountains, Lin Yi and her squad finally saw the incredible sight. The red-haired leader looked up in awe, confirming this was what they were looking for. The group stood in disbelief before the massive, pulsing vine. However, the awe quickly turned to fear. The group's adventurous friend suddenly grew pale and urged the others to stop, saying they shouldn't go any further. She was trembling with dread. She explained that seeing the vine in person gave her a terrible feeling. The leader then asked if they had seen the rumors on their internal pioneer forums. The friend's fear came from a dark story. She said she knew some of the pioneers from a team that had tried to touch the vine the last time it appeared. They were powerful, much stronger than she was, yet they all met a horrible end. She explained that after they came here, they were all buried, their skeletons now twisted within the roots of a dark version of the vine. Overcome with terror, she clutched her head in panic. She confessed she had a feeling they would all suffer the same fate. As she spoke, the reality around the group changed, and they were no longer on a mountain path. Instead, they were trapped inside a terrifying, pulsating, fleshy red cavern, the ground itself a gross mass of organic tendrils. The vision of their death was just a scary premonition. Back on the misty mountain path, the squad's adventurous friend, scammed in an online romance, was still shaken by the feeling of dread. She admitted that while she was originally ready to take the pioneer's risk, to either come back rich or die, the moment she saw the vine, she felt an overwhelming fear. Her gut told her this was a new, unknown, and powerful high-level monster, a mutation she couldn't handle. Tears filled her eyes as she said she wasn't ready to die here and wanted to back out. The red-haired leader and Lin Yi looked at their upset teammate with understanding. They confirmed they had all felt the same heavy feeling from the vine. Lin Yi explained it further, describing it as a feeling of complete emptiness within the wood-type vine. It was a strange feeling, as if all life had been swallowed by time, leaving only an empty shell. This, she explained, was why they all felt so scared. The group came to a scary conclusion. The vine was trying to eat their life force. Just as the fearful friend was about to panic, Lin Yi grabbed her hand, her face showing fierce determination. She declared that this was the path of the martial pioneer, a path that required them to face such dangers directly. Unseen by the group, Fang Yi watched from a nearby cliff. He, too, could sense the heavy, suffocating death energy coming from the giant vine. He noted that out of all the world monsters he had faced, besides the pure dark attribute, this vine gave him the worst feeling. He had to admit, the small squad had serious guts to even think about cultivating in such a dangerous place. He analyzed the monster more closely. While it was clearly a plant, a symbol of life, it felt completely lifeless. It wasn't really alive, but a dead thing pretending to be living, with no spiritual energy of its own. He could see it was stained with the blood and bodies of its past victims. Back with the squad, Lin Yi took charge. She stood on a cliff edge, speaking to her team with new purpose. She told them they didn't have much time to waste. Knowing the danger, she suggested a new plan. They would carefully sense the energy around the area, checking out the monster without getting too close. Confident in her plan, Lin Yi believed that by sensing the monster's energy from a distance, her team would be safe enough. She found a spot high in a tree and began to meditate, surrounding herself in a protective bubble of blue spiritual energy. From a clifftop far away, Fang Yi watched them. He was impressed by their caution, noting they had chosen a distance that was both safe and good for cultivating. He gave credit to his top student cousin for correctly figuring out the best range, a position that was neither too reckless nor too timid. As Yi's cultivation grew stronger, the spiritual energy around her began to surge. Fang Yi watched in surprise, realizing she was about to have a breakthrough to the 3-star ghost axe realm. He was genuinely impressed. His cousin was truly talented. In a bright flash of blue light, she successfully broke through. Her teammates watched in awe, amazed that she had already reached such a high level of power. However, the huge energy disturbance from her breakthrough did not go unnoticed. Deep in the forest, the sleeping roots of the giant vine began to twist and glow with a scary green light. The pioneers felt the ground shake, and one of the men looked back in alarm. The whole group panicked as the monstrous vine began moving directly toward them, its tendrils bursting from the earth. The team's leader was shocked that the creature could have possibly sensed them from so far away. The vine's attack was fast and brutal. Vicious green tendrils shot up from the ground, trapping 2 of the male pioneers. The rest of the squad scattered in fear as their friends screamed for them to run, warning that if they didn't escape now, they would all die there. The team's leader quickly realized what caused the disaster. Yi's breakthrough had created too much of a disturbance, getting the monster's attention. As she shouted a warning, dark green tendrils began to wrap around Yi's protective bubble, which was still shielding her while she was weak after her breakthrough. The leader knew they couldn't get caught. Once the vine wrapped around them, its deathly aura would eat them instantly. Under the immense pressure, Yi's energy shield began to crack. Chaos broke out as the red-haired leader tried to pull her panicked friend to safety. The friend screamed that they couldn't leave Yi behind, but the leader replied desperately, asking what she was supposed to do. She furiously asked if she should use her own precious spiritual energy to protect Yi, basically dying so her teammate could level up. As chaos erupted around them, the red-haired leader tried to calm one of her male teammates, who was arguing that they should leave Lin Yi to save themselves. He coldly said that life and death were up to fate, and if they didn't leave right away, they would all die with her. He reminded her that they were all just people who had met by chance, and that she was being too emotional. This cold, practical view, however, only made the leader angrier. She shoved him aside, shouting that she would not leave her teammate, even if it meant going against the rest of them. From his clifftop spot, Fang Yi watched the scene. He knew his cousin, still just a student, was probably unaware of how much danger she was in as she remained weak in her meditative state. The vine's power was overwhelming, and he wasn't sure if even he could save her with his current strength. But he knew he had to act fast, as the tendrils were already starting to crush her protective barrier. He clenched his fist, a golden aura flaring around him. He had made a promise to his aunt to take care of her, and a promise made must be kept. The red-haired leader jumped into action, leaping through the grabbing vines to reach Yi. She landed a powerful kick against one of the tendrils, breaking it with the force of the hit. But her victory didn't last long. Dozens more vines shot out, wrapping around her and trapping her completely. Just as the vines were about to crush her, Yi's protective shield finally broke. But before the monstrous plant could grab its new victims, Fang Yi stepped in. Leaping through the air, he sent out 2 arcs of bright golden energy from his sword. The rest of Yi's squad could only watch in horror, screaming her name as they saw her shield break. A massive, fiery, phoenix-shaped blast of energy shot down from the sky, hitting the mass of vines with explosive force. Fang Yi landed gracefully in the now cleared area, a small pillar of golden flame rising from the ground where he stood, having saved both his cousin and her brave leader just in time. As Fang Yi floated in a bright aura of golden light, just his presence was enough to overwhelm the deathly vine. The surviving members of the pioneer squad watched in stunned silence as the monstrous plant, which had just been moments from killing them all, stopped its attack and began to pull back from the overwhelming yang energy. The tendrils pulled back from the intense light, hissing and dissolving as they retreated. As Fang Yi came down, surrounded in a radiant glow, the pioneers could only cover their eyes from the blinding light, barely able to understand what was happening. The practical male pioneer who had suggested leaving Yi was completely shocked, questioning if this newcomer was another pioneer. The red-haired leader, just as stunned, recognized the power for what it was, the purest form of the yang attribute. She knew that only a high-tier power of this level could possibly push back such a powerful, life-draining monster. The male pioneer had a crisis of confidence. He had always thought of himself as extremely talented, having reached the 3-star Ghost Axe realm in a very short time, a feat few in the country could match. He knew that even the talented Lin Yi's skill barely matched his own, and yet this mysterious stranger was on a completely different level. He looked down at his own hands, then up at the glowing figure on the clifftop, feeling completely insignificant. If pioneers like that existed, he wondered, then what were they? The newcomer hadn't just beaten him, he had beaten all of them with his pure, overwhelming power. As Fang Yi stood bathed in the golden light of his power, his system activated. It had detected the extreme wood attribute from the deathly vine and had started the auto-writing process, quickly finishing a new technique. The system window then showed the details of his new ability. Endless Vitality, a technique that could instantly absorb all nearby life force to quickly heal injuries. As the power of the vine flowed into him, he was surrounded in a surge of green, life-giving energy. He was amazed at the incredible wood attribute technique he had just gotten, realizing that as long as there was life nearby, he now had what was basically a non-stop energy-absorbing engine. As Fang Yi absorbed the last of the anomaly's power, his system successfully extracted the vine's main attribute. A notification confirmed it. Extracted attribute, Desolation. The system described its scary power, the ability to instantly create a desolate aura that would destroy all surrounding life. Fang Yi stood calmly in the swirling green energy, fully taking in the new power. When he opened his eyes, they glowed with the same vibrant green as the desolate vine. He stood in the now lifeless clearing, a faint green aura around him. He now understood why the vine could only grow in such a dangerous, remote place. If it grew anywhere else, it would drain every bit of life for miles around. He thought about the ruthless nature of the desolation attribute, a powerful force that forcibly stole the life force of others. His thoughts were interrupted by a grateful voice. The red-haired leader of the pioneer group approached, her clothes torn and her body bruised, but she was alive. She thanked him greatly, saying that without him, they would all be dead. She then asked how they could possibly repay him for saving their lives. Fang Yi simply waved her off, coolly telling her there was no need and that they would meet again someday. He then turned and walked away. In his mind, however, he didn't feel like a hero. He knew that he had only found this opportunity because of their information. In his mind, he was the one who had benefited from the situation. As for the conflict he had seen among the pioneers, he wasn't concerned. With a final leap, he launched himself into the air, leaving the stunned squad behind. He knew that people's true characters are easily shown in a crisis, and a disorganized team like theirs would not be safe in the dangerous new era. Left in the empty clearing, the adventurous girl and the shaggy-haired man watched him go. The girl, still in shock, wondered aloud what they should do now. The man, however, answered her with a bitter, blaming tone, asking if she now regretted her earlier hesitation to save their teammates. With the immediate threat gone, and Lin Yi now at the third tier, the red-haired leader knew their best option was to stick together. Sometime later, Yi's eyes opened, glowing a brilliant blue as she came out of her meditation. Her teammates rushed to her side, relieved she was finally awake. The male pioneer who had suggested leaving her now said that their fate depended on their leader's wisdom, but another teammate said their focus should be on the mysterious stranger who had saved them. Still confused, Yi asked what had happened, noticing her other teammates lying unconscious on the ground. She stood up and was immediately hit by the powerful burning warmth of a leftover yang attribute on a nearby tree. She could feel its intense heat even from a distance. The shaggy-haired man then stepped forward, offering to explain what had happened while she was unconscious. Later that day, back in front of her cousin's apartment, Yi was still trying to understand the incredible events. She couldn't believe that someone so powerful actually existed. Her teammates' words echoed in her mind. He had called the mysterious pioneer a monster. He had described how the vines they couldn't even scratch had been easily pushed back by his power, and how the massive beanstalk had retreated far into the sky, no longer daring to come near them. Such was the overwhelming presence of the man who had saved them. She knew that even though he was long gone, the vine was still calm, a sign of his lingering power. She opened the door to the apartment and was surprised to find Fang Yi there to greet her. He looked at her with concern, noticing that she looked a little pale. Yi quickly pulled herself together, forcing a smile as she brushed off his concern, blaming her tiredness on a long day of studying. Fang Yi accepted her excuse, telling her she had worked hard and should go rest. He offered to order takeout for dinner, and she agreed before heading to her room. Once inside, she collapsed onto her bed, completely exhausted. She knew that breakthroughs were mentally draining, requiring a lot of concentration. She felt more tired than if she had stayed up for a month straight. Lying on her bed and scrolling through her phone, she felt a sense of relief. She was no longer an ordinary person. She wouldn't die from a few all-nighters. She accepted that this constant, life-threatening struggle was the fate of a pioneer in a world where things had begun to change. She thought of her cousin's seemingly normal, peaceful life and knew that such a life was no longer possible for her. Her quiet thoughts were interrupted by a new message in her Pioneer group chat. It was from a user named Jiaolan, the mysterious, powerful member who was usually absent. Jiaolan had sent a simple, direct message. If there are any more traces of that strong man, please inform me. This was the first time Jiaolan had ever spoken in the group, and it immediately got Yi's attention. She replied, agreeing to the request, before asking her own question to the group. She asked if they thought the man who had saved them could be the same one from the Dark River Lava Dragon incident, and if so, why he would have helped them. The group chat immediately lit up with a post about the mysterious high-tier Yang attribute master. The post described his sun-splitting slash in great detail, telling how the witness had been forced out of the cave by a blast of white-hot light. The author of the post declared with total certainty that no other pioneer in the Xia country could match his power, and warned everyone to stay away if they ever met him. Meanwhile, Fang Yi was heading out for the evening on his bicycle. He was confident that after the day's events, his cousin would have let her guard down around him, letting him come and go without making her suspicious. With his new freedom, he had a new mission in mind. It was time to find a suitable carrier for his new desolation attribute. He knew that this power was most compatible with plants, and he pedaled off into the night to begin his search. As he rode through the night, Fang Yi thought about the best way to use his newly acquired desolation attribute. He knew that despite its power, it was still a bad attribute at its core, based on destruction and decay. He worried that putting it on his own body could lead to bad reactions. Furthermore, he was concerned that its evil nature might conflict with the good, purifying power of his thunder attribute. He decided that the best solution would be to find a carrier for the attribute, something like the strange vine itself. He guessed that the original vine monster had been born when a regular plant sensed the return of rich spiritual energy and chose to evolve, creating the desolation attribute as a way to gather more power. With this in mind, a plan began to form in his mind. With a confident smirk, he knew exactly where he needed to go. He followed a moonlit road, guided by a sign pointing toward the forest park. He arrived at the large urban park and left his bike, going into the woods. Under the bright full moon, he walked through a field of vibrant, glowing flowers. He knew he needed to find the perfect lucky one, a plant that could create the greatest connection with his own spiritual energy and show a sense of closeness to him. Closing his eyes, he focused, reaching out with his own spiritual energy. A vibrant green aura flowed from him, spreading throughout the forest and covering the plants. He could feel a response from the plants, a wave of their own spiritual energy rising up to meet his. He noted that while their response was a lot, it still wasn't strong enough for what he needed. As Fang Yi continued to send out his spiritual energy, he realized he needed a much stronger response from the plants around him. Suddenly, he stopped, his attention drawn to a specific spot in the forest. There, in the tall grass, a single white flower with a glowing center gently swayed, as if calling to him. He wondered if this was the one he had been searching for. He approached it carefully and reached out his finger. As his fingertip touched it, the flower's petals closed around it, and he could feel it absorbing the spiritual energy he was giving off. The flower then bloomed again, seemingly happy, as if it had just had a good meal. Fang Yi knelt beside the flower, a small smile on his face. He noted its strong spirituality. Though it was just a plant, it had reacted to his touch like a greedy puppy, eagerly eating his spiritual energy and then rubbing against his fingers for more. He knew he had found his carrier. Out of the entire forest, this small flower had the strongest reaction to his aura, making it the perfect container for the desolation attribute. He told the flower that it was the chosen one and asked if it was ready. Without waiting for an answer, he unleashed a vortex of green spiritual energy, focusing it entirely on the small white flower. A system window appeared, asking for confirmation. Do you want to forcibly implant the desolation attribute into this plant? With his eyes glowing a vibrant green, he gave his consent. A brilliant light erupted from his hand as the flower began to transform, its petals opening into a much larger, more complex, and powerful form. The implantation process was finished in a bright flash of green light. Fang Yi was surprised for a moment by the sudden burst of power. The small, simple white flower had been completely changed. Its petals had opened into a beautiful, lotus-like flower, and its leaves had grown thick and bright, all of it glowing with a powerful green aura. The newly powered flower immediately began to show its influence. It released a massive wave of desolation energy, its roots digging into the ground as it drew power. The effect was instant and destructive. The green, healthy forest around Fang Yi was drained of its life in seconds, the trees dying and the ground turning to dust. He was amazed at the pure, evil power of the desolation attribute. In just a few moments, the energy had eaten the entire section of the forest and was still spreading quickly. As the flower's light began to fade and its form shrank to a smaller size, Fang Yi knew he had to leave. If he let the process go on any longer, the huge energy disturbance would surely get the attention of the Spiritual Energy Association. He reached down and plucked the glowing flower from the ground, roots and all. He knew this park was a risky place for such an experiment. Being so close to the city center, it was certainly watched by the association, who were worried about how the spiritual energy revival could turn even normal plants into dangerous threats. He had noticed the increased number of security cameras and the lack of any other people in the park when he arrived. As he walked away, holding his new prize, he noticed something incredible. The flower was still absorbing energy from the air, surviving and even doing well without its roots connected to the earth. He looked at it more closely, a smile of wonder on his face. He found it magical that its spirituality hadn't weakened at all since being pulled up, especially since it had been just an ordinary wildflower moments before he chose it. This led him to a deep conclusion. By giving the desolation attribute to the plant, he had unlocked its evolutionary potential, setting it on a path to becoming something far greater than it was ever meant to be. Just as Fang Yi was about to leave the park, a loud alarm blared through the forest, its red light flashing. A loud robotic voice gave a serious warning. Abnormal value exceeded. Fang Yi immediately realized that even though he tried to be quick, he had still set off the park's monitoring system. With no time to waste, he grabbed his newly acquired desolation flower and quickly left. Miles away, in a high-tech control room labeled Spiritual Energy Revival Plant Research Department, the same alarms blared. Technicians scrambled, shouting that the anomaly value was going crazy and demanding to know what was happening. An order was quickly given. All staff were to put on their protective bracelets, enter the park, and immediately block off the area, stopping anyone from entering or leaving. A team in full protective gear entered the now lifeless section of the forest. One member checked the reading on his wrist device, which showed a dangerously high value of 30. He noted that this was terrifyingly high. For comparison, the incident at Qingcheng University had only ranged between 8 and 10, and even the powerful Dark River Lava Dragon had peaked at 25. Another team member added that the park's original spiritual energy level had never even gone above 10. As one of the researchers took a soil sample, another reported his strange findings. The air humidity, surface temperature, and sunlight were all completely normal. Yet, all the plants in the area looked as if they had been drained of their life in a matter of seconds. The team leader decided they needed to get closer to the center to figure out what kind of spiritual attribute could have caused such an event. However, as one of the members stepped forward, another researcher with glasses, who seemed to be a senior member, shouted at him to stop and not get any closer. He warned them with serious authority not to touch anything, identifying the leftover energy as the desolation attribute. He then asked if any of them knew about the vine that had recently come down from the sky. The younger researchers were stunned into silence. One of them finally found his voice, realizing with growing horror that the senior researcher was talking about the infamous, devil-like vine that had already been classified as an A-level mutation. The senior researcher confirmed their fears. Standing before a ghostly image of the vine with the souls of its victims trapped at its base, he explained the source of its terrifying power. The reason it was so deadly, the reason it had killed so many pioneers, was its natural desolation attribute. A powerful parasitic ability that drained the life force from all surrounding creatures, making everything it touched its own. The young researcher, who had been about to step into the dead area, clutched his chest, sweating and gasping in terror. He thanked his superior, realizing that he had just been saved from certain death. The senior researcher explained that the area around any plant that had awakened the desolation attribute was a dead zone, where anyone who entered would have their life force eaten. He remembered seeing data on another such plant in the Xia country, a rotting ancient tree in a forbidden zone in Wan City that instantly destroyed any life that came near it. He looked around at the lifeless clearing with serious concern, noting that the mutation of plants in this new era could not be ignored. From what they knew, the desolation attribute was the strongest a plant could awaken, and now, in addition to the ancient tree and the celestial vine, a third had been born. His lecture was interrupted by a hand clapping him on the shoulder. The research team turned in surprise to see the stern face of Major Han Li, who had arrived with his own group of soldiers. The major had already been told about the situation. He ordered all the researchers on site to change into the advanced protective suits his men had brought and to follow him into the contaminated area. With Major Han Li leading the way, the newly equipped team, now joined by Su Qingying, stepped firmly into the dead zone. As they moved forward with their scanners, they made a series of confusing discoveries. They couldn't find a source for the desolation energy, and the aura itself was quickly fading, the level having dropped to 25 in the few minutes since they arrived. This went against what they knew about the celestial vine, which was supposed to be able to move. Major Han Li turned to Su Qingying, suggesting they investigate the area more closely. She agreed, her expression serious. As Major Han Li and Su Qingying began their investigation, two members of the team with glowing blue auras started tracing the flow of the leftover spiritual energy. The energy trails led them from the outer edges of the dead zone back to a single starting point. As they got closer, they stopped, their faces filled with shock. The Major and Su Qingying realized the horrifying truth at the same time. The source of the desolation energy had been dug up and taken away. A researcher in a protective suit couldn't believe what he was hearing, questioning how such a thing was even possible. Major Han Li knew that if someone truly had the power to enter a desolation dead zone and steal its source, their identity was extremely important. Su Qingying, however, had another theory. She showed a glowing data pad to the Major, explaining that after running a big data analysis, they had found a person whose movements matched both this incident and another recent mutation. The file on the screen showed a picture of Fang Yi, his name clearly visible. Just then, Major Li told Su Qingying that he would send her all of Fang Yi's information, confirming that he was highly likely the same pioneer she had been in contact with. With that, he tipped his hat, saying the rest was up to her association to handle. Left alone in the desolate woods, Su Qingying held the datapad, her expression one of grim understanding. 2 hours later, back in his apartment, Fang Yi carefully placed his new desolation flower into a small pot. He smiled, thinking that this was his first time raising a flower. He affectionately named it the obedient little white flower, and told it that since it now had the desolation attribute, it would cultivate on its own and become a powerful helper for him. He knew its special, life-draining powers would be a great help in battle, and its simple appearance would be the perfect camouflage, easily hidden from his cousin. As he gently touched a petal, he thought that in the dangerous new world, raw power was only part of the equation. The real key to victory was having more secret weapons. Fang Yi's quiet evening was interrupted by his phone buzzing on the table. He picked it up, surprised to see the caller ID, Old Wang. He immediately recognized the name as his childhood friend, Wang Liang, whom he hadn't seen in the 3 years since he'd left to join the army. A brief flashback showed the two as close friends in their school days, a bond that was broken when Wang Liang suddenly announced his decision to enlist. Fang Yi answered the call. On the other end, Wang Liang's cheerful voice greeted him, asking if he was back in town and inviting him out for a drink at their old spot. Fang Yi was taken aback by how sudden it all was. Wang Liang just laughed, adding that he had a big secret to tell him and that he shouldn't be shocked when he heard it. However, the seemingly friendly reunion was a carefully planned setup. After hanging up the phone, it was revealed that Wang Liang was not alone. He was in a dimly lit room, reporting to a tough and heavily scarred woman with long red hair and a high-ranking military uniform. Su Qingying was also at the table. Wang Liang confirmed to the officer that he had done as instructed. He then made a special request, asking that if Fang Yi was not the person they were looking for, they would guarantee his safety. The red-haired officer tapped her finger impatiently on the table. She coldly dismissed his concern, ordering him to simply do his mission and not do anything unnecessary. With a chilling lack of feeling, she added that if Fang Yi turned out to be the wrong person, Wang Liang should just consider it a punishment for his friend. At a quiet bar, Fang Yi and Wang Liang toasted with their beer glasses. They sat and drank, catching up after being apart for 3 years. Fang Yi noticed his old friend seemed much more mature and guessed that his time in the army must have been hard. Wang Liang talked about his experiences in the military before asking Fang Yi how he had been. Fang Yi gave a simple reply, saying he was doing well and had gone to college. As he drank his beer, he thought back to his past life. In that chaotic time, he never had the chance to see Wang Liang again. He remembered that his friend, as a soldier, had probably died in some forgotten battle. He wondered if this time, in this new life, he could change his old friend's fate. Wang Liang then changed the subject, his tone becoming more serious. He asked Fang Yi if he had seen anything strange lately, like zombies or monsters from movies. Fang Yi was immediately on guard. He knew it wasn't surprising for someone in the army to know about the spiritual energy revival, but the direct question felt like a test to see what he knew. Playing dumb, Fang Yi asked what he was trying to say. Wang Liang sighed and explained that he wasn't trying to comfort him, but to warn him. He told Fang Yi that in the near future, everything they valued, education, wealth, status, would become worthless. The entire world order was about to change. Fang Yi listened closely, his face showing no emotion as he stared at his empty glass. He knew that ordinary soldiers were sworn to secrecy and couldn't leak any details about the spiritual energy revival. This confirmed his suspicion. The military had identified him as a target, and Wang Liang, his childhood friend, had been sent to test him. Wang Liang, seeing his friend's silence, tried to reassure him. He told him not to worry, that as long as he didn't reveal anything, he would be fine. But Fang Yi understood the situation. Despite his pretended ignorance, his friend was still trying to help him. Even at the risk of breaking military rules, Wang Liang was kindly warning him to be careful of the coming changes. Their conversation was suddenly cut short when Wang Liang's phone began to vibrate urgently. He answered the call, and a furious voice on the other end ordered him to return to his team immediately and report to the target location within 10 minutes. Wang Liang snapped to attention, accepting the order as Fang Yi watched in silence. He immediately jumped up, apologizing to Fang Yi and explaining that he had an urgent mission and couldn't see him home. As his friend was about to leave, Fang Yi dropped his act. He asked if the mission was related to the spiritual energy revival and told his friend to take him along. Wang Liang stopped, turning back to look at Fang Yi with a mix of shock and confusion. Fang Yi stood up and grabbed his friend by the collar. He told Wang Liang to take him to see his superiors, letting him know that he was aware of the real reason for their meeting. He reassured his friend, telling him that while he didn't know exactly what his superiors knew, he knew Wang Liang would never hurt him. He explained that he was more interested in what the military was dealing with, knowing it had to be related to the great changes happening in the world. Since the Spiritual Energy Association was already handling the monsters, he was curious what the military's role was, and he wanted to see it for himself. Wang Liang agreed, and the two of them walked toward a massive, heavily guarded military base in a mountain valley, labeled Military Number 19 Spiritual Forbidden Zone. As they got closer, Fang Yi was struck by the incredibly dense spiritual energy in the area. He noted that the concentration level was so high it had likely surpassed a standard pollution zone. As they were met by a squad of soldiers, one of them ordered Wang Liang to return to his team. After a quick check, the soldiers allowed Fang Yi to enter the base, leading him through a brightly lit corridor. Inside the military base, Fang Yi and Wang Liang were led into a massive, cavern-like training ground. There, a large group of soldiers was in a desperate battle, using crackling blue energy to hold back a monstrous, spiky black creature with a single glowing red eye. The beast fought back with fierce power, shooting a devastating beam of red energy that tore through the soldiers' ranks, causing cries of pain and fear. Standing on a raised platform, the tough, red-haired officer watched the scene with a critical eye. Fang Yi, who had been brought before her, immediately recognized the creature's power as a mix of two different attributes. The officer confirmed his thought, saying the monster was a perfect mix of the dark and flame attributes, making it exceptionally fierce and cruel. She added that it had already seriously injured several of her soldiers. A caption identified her as a 3-star Ghost Axe Realm officer named Ji Royan. Spotting Wang Liang, she barked his name, and he immediately stood at attention. She furiously asked why he had brought an unauthorized person into a restricted area, but before he could explain, she cut him off. Her expression softened a little as she told him to forget it, explaining that the situation was urgent and they needed him to join the formation immediately. She then turned her attention to Fang Yi. She saw nothing special about him, noting that his spiritual energy was only slightly active. She briefly wondered if he was the powerful pioneer they were looking for, but dismissed the thought, knowing she had to focus on the battle. She gave him a stern warning. Since he was Wang Liang's friend, she wouldn't say much, but he was in a restricted area, and his life was now his own responsibility. He was also sworn to secrecy about anything he saw. Fang Yi simply replied that he understood. With that done, Ji Royan took command. She picked up a massive energy cannon and shouted the names of two of her soldiers. The two men immediately jumped into action, their bodies covered in blue energy as they fought the monster up close. Ji Royan then aimed her cannon and fired a massive blast of pure energy at the creature. The attack hit the monster head-on, creating a huge explosion, but the creature was far from beaten. It let out an angry roar as its shadowy form began to pulse with a terrifying red light, its fanged mouth growing larger and more threatening. It was clear that the attack had only made it angrier, causing its mutation to get worse. The enraged monster lashed out with its massive claws, and one soldier shouted a warning to his comrade. The other soldier managed to block the attack, but the force of the blow sent him flying backward. Ji Royan immediately took charge, ordering her team not to be careless and to keep their distance. She knew they had to finish the creature off before it could complete its evolution. Watching from the side, Fang Yi was impressed by the soldier's performance. He saw a well-trained team of comrades who trusted each other completely, with incredible discipline and coordination. He knew that every person was essential, and that when they worked together, they could unleash a power far greater than their individual strengths. This thought, however, was immediately broken when he realized the monster's power was increasing at a scary rate. He shouted at them to run, warning them that they were no match for the creature in its current state. But his warning was lost in the chaos. The monster shot out a massive blast of dark purple energy, sending the soldiers flying. Ji Royan refused to back down. She ordered her team to raise their alert level and upgrade the restricted area's mutation level. With a furious roar, she commanded that no one was to retreat. It was too late. The monster's transformation was complete. It now stood as a huge, demonic beast, covered in black and red flames, its eyes glowing with pure evil. One of the soldiers shouted a terrified warning. The evil dog had fully mixed with the dark attribute and completed its mutation. The creature's single eye, now a burning red orb, focused on a new target. It fixed its gaze on Wang Liang, who could only stare back, frozen in terror. As the monster prepared to strike, Ji Royan and Fang Yi both reacted in horror, realizing with a jolt that Wang Liang was in mortal danger. Just as the monster completed its evolution, lunging forward in a blast of power, a soldier was violently thrown backward by a surge of energy. Ji Royan immediately shouted for her team's attention, announcing that the C-level evil dog had fully mutated and was now reclassified as a B-level threat, requiring an immediate change in their battle plan. The soldier who had been thrown to the ground coughed up a spray of blood. Fang Yi rushed to his side, catching him and asking if he was all right. The injured soldier explained that he had been trying to send spiritual energy to the monster's restraining collar, but the creature's evolution had caused the device to violently explode. Despite coughing up a black, thick liquid, the soldier tried to be brave, telling Fang Yi not to worry about the officers of Restricted Area 19. Fang Yi could only look on with a grim, angry expression. Realizing her normal weapons were now useless, Ji Royan dropped her heavy energy cannon to the ground. She stood before her remaining troops, her determination unshaken. She gave a final, desperate order. No matter what they had to do, even if it cost them their very lives, they could not let this B-level mutation escape the restricted zone. But just as she and her team were about to make their last stand, Fang Yi stepped directly in front of her, blocking her path. Ji Royan demanded to know what he thought he was doing, but he ignored her. His eyes and hand began to glow with a brilliant blue light as arcs of raw lightning crackled around him. A clear sign. Stand. Fang Yi stepped directly in front of her, blocking her path. Ji Royan demanded to know what he thought he was doing, but he ignored her. His eyes and hand began to glow with a brilliant blue light as arcs of raw lightning crackled around him. A clear sign that he was about to join the battle himself. Surrounded by crackling blue lightning, Fang Yi mocked the monstrous creature, his eyes glowing with power as he questioned how tough it was. He then charged toward the mutated beast, his arm a bolt of bright blue energy aimed right at the creature's head. The impact was huge, as a massive explosion of divine thunder erupted when he hit it, completely overwhelming the monster. The sheer force of the attack created a powerful shockwave that sent the nearby soldiers flying backward. One of the soldiers, stunned, said he couldn't believe it, realizing this was the same B-level monster that even their commander, Ji Royan, couldn't beat alone. Wang Liang, just as shocked, turned to Ji Royan and asked if his friend was really who they thought he was. With a serious look, she confirmed that none of them were wrong. She declared that he was, without a doubt, the pioneer known as the Tyrant. Fang Yi stood calmly before the beast, which was still on fire but clearly hurt by the lightning. Seeing it wasn't completely beaten, he noted that he would have to finish the job. He then told Ji Royan and Wang Liang to stand back for their own safety. Ji Royan watched him, thinking about how her whole squad needed a complex formation just to face a B-level threat, yet he was getting ready to handle it all by himself. She wondered what kind of power he had. She had to admit that his was the most extreme form of the thunder attribute she had ever seen. She knew that even now, he was a top-tier pioneer in the entire country, and she began to wonder about his potential once the spiritual energy revival was fully underway. As Fang Yi raised his hand, gathering even more electrical energy, a shocked look appeared on Ji Royan's face. She looked up to see a massive storm of thunder energy forming in the sky above him, and she couldn't help but wonder just how scary his power would become as he continued to evolve. With a final step forward, Fang Yi unleashed the full power of his thunder attribute. A massive pillar of bright blue lightning erupted from the ground where the monster stood, a display of power that truly matched his codename, the Tyrant. His eyes, still crackling with leftover electricity, showed a calm determination as the blinding light from his attack began to fade. The surviving soldiers watched in terror. One commented to another that the sight made his whole body shake. While he could handle the monster's corrosive dark power, the pure, destructive force of the thunder was on a completely different level.
Thanks for watching. I'm going to see you next video.